Hello and welcome to a new practice video solution here today. So today we're looking at patterns of fractions. We're going to use some of the same tricks that we were learning and working with when we're adding and subtracting fractions. Of course, the first thing we need to do is make sure we're dealing with like things. Okay, so when we have a quarter and a half and 3/4, what if we try to see if we can get these all as the same fraction? Okay, so how would I turn this? Always look at the denominators and always look at the smallest denominator to see how I can turn that into using multiplication is the easiest way. So how can I turn a 2 into 4? Well, I would double it. Okay, so I'm going to copy this down, 1/4. This one is 3/4. They already have a common denominator. Now what would happen? It would be 2 times 2 to make 4. And same thing to the top, 1 times 2 to make 2. Okay, so do you agree that just looking at this fraction here, 1/2 and 2/4 are the same? So the next step, once we see a common denominator, now we know we're all working with fourths and we just want to see what the change would be. So what is a rule for this sequence? What is changing each step? Okay, so we go from 1/4 to 2/4 to 3/4. The denominator is staying the same, but the top is changing by 1, right? So 1/4 plus 1/4 makes 2/4, 2/4 plus 1 more. So each step we're changing by +1. Okay, so if we wanted the next step, it would be adding 1 more fourth. So 3/4 plus 1/4 would be 4/4. You see the pattern? So the pattern, the denominator doesn't change because that's telling us what language we're speaking as far as what type of step we're taking. So it's the common, once we find that common denominator, we're looking for that common step, okay? But then we're seeing how much it changes by. It's changing by +1, specifically +1/4 is a rule for that pattern. Let's try another one. Okay, so we have 1/9, 1/3, and 5/9. So what if we change this 1/3 into something ninths? Well, how would I get from 3 to 9 using multiplication? That would be times 3. Okay, so we fixed that. Now it's going to be over 9. But what is the top? We have to do the same thing to the top. Okay, so we multiplied 3 by 3 to make 9. So we're going to do 1 times 3. And if you think about it, 1/3 and 3/9 is the same. Okay. So now if we have 1/9, just copying this down, the middle is now 3/9, the top is, this right side is 5/9. So what is changing? How do I go from 1 to 3? Well, that's +2. Let's see if the pattern stays consistent. How do I go from 3 to 5? That's also +2. Now the rule is it's not quite just +2, right? It's +2. And what is that common fraction that we're using, the common denominator? So it's +2/9 is what we're looking for. That's the pattern. Let's try another one. Okay, so we want to look for the least common denominator. So these are now all different. So do we have a denominator of 10, a denominator of 5, and a denominator of 2? So how would I go? How would I turn this middle fraction into something over 10? How would I get from 5 to 10 using multiplication? Well, it would be times 2, right? So 5 times 2 makes 10. Whatever I do to the bottom of the fraction, I do to the top. Now, before I do this next step, how would I go from 2 to 10 using multiplication? Because we're looking to make all of the denominators 10, okay? So it would be 2 times 5 makes 10. Whatever I do to the bottom, again, I do to the top of that fraction. So now let's work through this. So I had, at the beginning, 3 over 10. This middle term becomes 2 times 2 is 4. 5 times 2 is 10. Okay, we're good so far. The denominator is 10. Now how about this one? 1 times 5 is 5. 2 times 5 is 10. Okay, good to go. Now we have all of the denominators 10. So what is the change? What is the step that's happening each time? So 3 to 4 plus 1. 4 to 5 is plus 1. So we have a consistent change of plus 1. And what is that common denominator that we have? We're changing by 1/10, right? 3/10, 4/10, 5/10. So plus 1/10 is our answer. Okay, one more. So now we're dealing with mixed fractions where you have whole numbers and fractions all together. Again, the first step is always to get a common denominator on these fractions. So we have 3, 18, and 9. So we want to look at the largest denominator, 18. Is there a way I can get from 3 to 18 using multiplication? How about 3 times 6? Whatever is done to the bottom is done to the top, times 6, okay? Now let's look at this fraction over here. Is there any way that I can get from 9 to 18 using multiplication? 9 times 2, okay, whatever is done to the bottom is done to the top always. So let's see what this starts to look like. So 2 times 6 is 12. 3 times 6 is 18. And we didn't change the whole number here. So that's 10 and 12/18. Then we have 9 and 11/18. So that's good. We have common denominators on the fractions now. And finally, this side over here, 5 times 2 is 10. 9 times 2 is 18. And that was a big number of 8. Okay, so let's see if there's a pattern that we can identify. So how many whole numbers are dropping each time? Okay, so from 10 to 9, that's minus 1 whole number. And from 9 to 8, that's minus another whole number, right? 10, 9, 8. So we're losing one whole number each step. So the rule would be minus 1 and probably a fraction too. Let's figure out what that is. We'll do a fraction bar. Okay, the fraction is changing. It's changing by 18ths, right? And how much is it changing each time? So from 12 to 11. So from 12 to 11, that's minus 1/18th, right? And how about from 11 to 10? That's also, again, minus 1/18th is the change, right? From 11, 12/18 to 11/18 to 10/18. So it's losing one big number and minus 1/18 each time. So the rule for this pattern would be minus 1 and 1/18.